The champagne glass exploded against the helicopter's windshield. Victoria Sterling's hand was still shaking from the throw. $28 million of precision engineering, now dripping with Dom Perignon. "You pathetic cowards!" she screamed at her engineers. 3 years of my life." Her eyes swept the hangar and landed on the old janitor mopping near the landing gear. Gray hair. Worn coveralls. Nobody. She pointed at him. "You fly this helicopter right now and I'll marry you." The hangar erupted in laughter. What nobody knew that Janitor had flown missions in 3 wars. Comment below what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. Part 1. The Invisible Man. The mop moved in slow, steady circles across the oil-stained concrete. James Mitchell had learned a long time ago that invisible men hear everything. At 58 years old, he'd mastered the art of being furniture. Present but unnoticed. Breathing but forgotten. 3 years at Sterling Aerospace had taught him that coveralls made you a ghost. "It's a death trap," one of the engineers muttered, thinking no one important was listening. "I don't care what the simulations say. That fly-by-wire system has a 0.3-second lag in the collective response." "Tell that to Victoria," another whispered back. "She's already sold 12 units to the military. They're expecting delivery in 6 months." James kept mopping. The Phoenix MH7. He'd watched them build it piece by piece for 3 years. He knew every bolt, every wire, every design flaw they'd argued over during late-night sessions when they thought the cleaning crew had gone home. He knew the 0.3-second lag wasn't a flaw. It was intentional, a safety buffer to prevent overcorrection. These kids, and they were kids, most of them barely 30, didn't understand combat flight. They'd never had to make a decision in the half-second between life and death. They'd never felt the stick shake in their hands while tracers lit up the sky around them. James had, more times than he could count. The hangar doors slammed open with a sound like thunder. Victoria Sterling walked in like a storm system about to make landfall. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. At 42, she'd inherited Sterling Aerospace from her father 4 years ago. Since then, she'd cut staff by 30%, increased profits by 60%, and earned a reputation that made grown men check their emails at 3 in the morning. "Conference room, now." She didn't raise her voice. She never had to. The engineers scattered like startled birds. James continued mopping, working his way toward the helicopter's tail rotor. From here, he could see into the conference room through the glass walls. Victoria stood at the head of the table with her arms crossed. Even from this distance, James could see the tension in her shoulders. The board meeting was in 2 weeks. The military contracts were contingent on successful flight tests. And nobody would fly the helicopter. She'd burned through 4 test pilots in 6 months. 1 quit after the first simulation. 2 refused after reviewing the specs. The 4th had the courage to tell her the truth. "Ma'am, this bird is brilliant, but it's aggressive. It needs someone who understands combat flight dynamics, not civilian test protocols." She'd fired him on the spot. James remembered that conversation. He'd been replacing the water cooler in the corner of the conference room. Another invisible task by an invisible man. Now through the glass, he watched Victoria's face redden as she addressed her team. Her voice was muted by the walls, but her fury wasn't. The conference room door burst open. 3 years! Victoria's voice echoed across the hangar like a cannon shot. "I have put 3 years of my life into this project. My father said I couldn't do it. The board said I was wasting resources, and I proved them wrong." She stalked toward the helicopter, her heels striking the concrete like gunshots. "This machine is perfect. The engineering is flawless. The simulations are pristine, and not one of you has the courage to fly it." The engineers filed out of the conference room, avoiding eye contact like children caught misbehaving. James had seen this before, in officers who ruled by fear instead of respect. It never ended well. Marcus Chen, the lead engineer, tried to speak. "Miss Sterling, with all due respect, don't." Her voice dropped to something dangerous, something cold. "Don't you dare tell me about respect while you're refusing to do your jobs. We're engineers, not pilots. Then find me a pilot." The words exploded out of her, bouncing off the hangar walls. "Find me someone who isn't a coward." That's when she saw James. He was still mopping, working his way along the edge of the hangar. His hands moved with the same rhythm they'd kept for 3 years. Steady, patient, invisible. Victoria's eyes locked onto him. Something shifted in her expression. Not kindness, something worse. Inspiration born from desperation and rage. She walked toward him, her entourage following like nervous sheep. James kept mopping. "You." She stopped 5 feet away. "What's your name?" James looked up slowly. His eyes met hers without flinching. "Mitchell, ma'am." "James Mitchell." "Mitchell." She rolled the name around like she was tasting something bitter. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years, ma'am." 3 years. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Only teeth. "So you've been here since we started building the Phoenix?" "Yes, ma'am." She turned to her engineers, her voice rising for the audience. "This man has been here as long as you have. He's seen every stage of development. He's probably watched you build this helicopter bolt by bolt." James said nothing. Years of military discipline had taught him when to speak and when to wait. Victoria turned back to him. "Do you know what this helicopter is worth, Mitchell?" "I heard 28 million, ma'am." $28 million. She let that number hang in the air like smoke. "Do you know what it does?" James paused for just a moment. "Advanced Tactical Helicopter, Fly-by-Wire Control System, Composite Airframe, designed for special operations insertion and extraction." The engineers exchanged glances. That was specific. Too specific for a janitor. Victoria's smile widened. "You've been paying attention." "Hard not to, ma'am. You all talk pretty loud." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Victoria didn't laugh. "Tell me, Mitchell, in 3 years of mopping floors around my engineers, have you ever heard any of them volunteer to test fly this aircraft?" "No, ma'am." "Do you know why?" James met her eyes. He saw something there, a challenge, a dare. A woman pushed to the edge of reason by pride and pressure. "Fear, ma'am." The word landed like a slap. The engineers shifted uncomfortably. Marcus started to object, but Victoria held up her hand. "Fear," she repeated. "That's honest. More honest than I've heard from anyone in this building in 6 months." She stepped closer to James. He could smell her perfume. Something expensive that probably cost more than his monthly salary. "Let me ask you something, Mitchell." "Ma'am, are you afraid?" "Afraid of what, ma'am?" "Of that helicopter." James looked past her at the Phoenix MH7. Beautiful lines. Aggressive stance. The kind of machine that demanded respect, not fear. He'd flown aircraft like this before, in places where the wrong decision meant body bags instead of debriefs. "No, ma'am. I'm not afraid of it." Victoria's eyes lit up like she'd just found a winning lottery ticket. "Really?" "It's a tool, ma'am. Tools don't scare me. Only what people do with them." She spun around to face her team, her voice rising to fill the entire hangar. "Did you hear that the janitor isn't afraid of the helicopter?" More uncomfortable laughter. Someone in the back pulled out their phone. James saw the red recording light blink on. Victoria faced him again. "You know what, Mitchell, I'm going to make you an offer." "Ma'am, I don't think—" "Fly this helicopter." She gestured at the Phoenix like a game show host revealing the grand prize. "Fly it successfully right now, and I will marry you." The hangar erupted. Laughter rolled through the crowd like thunder. Someone shouted, "Oh my God, she's finally lost it." Another voice cut through, "This is going straight to TikTok." James stood perfectly still, his hands resting on the mop handle. He'd faced enemy fire over Somalia, mechanical failures at 10,000 feet over Afghanistan, the slow, merciless death of his wife Helen from Alzheimer's, watching her forget his name one syllable at a time. This was just noise. Victoria was playing to the crowd now, her voice theatrical, her arms spread wide. "I'm serious. Right here, right now. Fly my helicopter, and I'll marry you. We'll have the wedding right here in this hangar." The engineers were dying laughing. Marcus looked mortified. The phones were everywhere now, all recording, all waiting for the punchline. James waited for the laughter to die down. It took almost a minute. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise like a knife through silk. "Is that a real offer, ma'am?" The laughter stopped. Victoria's smile flickered. She hadn't expected that. "What I said is that a real offer? Because if it is, I need to understand the terms." She stared at him. The hangar had gone silent. So silent you could hear the ventilation system humming in the rafters. You're serious?" "You made the offer, ma'am. I'm just asking if you meant it." The crowd had stopped laughing. This wasn't funny anymore. This was something else entirely. Victoria recovered quickly. She was good at that. "Of course I meant it. But you're a janitor, Mitchell. You can't fly a helicopter." "I didn't say I could, ma'am. I just asked if you meant what you said." She laughed, but it sounded forced. Hollow. "Fine. Yes, it's a real offer. Fly that helicopter, and I'll marry you." She paused, her smile turning cruel. "But you can't fly it, so—" "I can fly it." The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Victoria blinked. "What?" "I said I can fly it, ma'am." Marcus stepped forward, his face pale. "Mitchell, this isn't a joke. That's a $28 million aircraft with experimental flight systems. You can't just—" "I know what it is." James set down his mop. The wooden handle clattered against the concrete floor, and somehow that small sound echoed louder than Victoria's screaming had. "I've watched you build it for 3 years. I know the collective has a 0.3-second lag. I know you're using a triple redundant hydraulic system. I know the fly-by-wire uses fiber optics instead of traditional wiring to reduce electromagnetic interference." The silence was total now. James turned to Victoria. "You want someone to fly your helicopter, I'll fly it. But when I do, I want you to remember what you said." "Why?" "Not because I expect you to keep your word. People like you never do." Victoria's face flushed red. "But because I want you to think about what it means to make promises you don't intend to keep. To treat people like entertainment. To measure someone's worth by their coveralls instead of their character." "How dare—" "I'll fly it now if you want." James took a step toward the helicopter. "Or you can back out. Your choice, ma'am." The crowd was riveted. Every phone was recording. Every breath was held. This quiet janitor, this old man in worn coveralls, had just challenged one of the most powerful women in aerospace. Victoria's pride wouldn't let her back down. Not in front of everyone, not on camera. "Fine." Her voice was ice. "Fly it. And when you crash my $28 million prototype, I'll sue you for every penny you have." James nodded slowly. "Fair enough, ma'am." He walked toward the helicopter. The crowd parted silently, like the Red Sea before Moses. James could feel their eyes on him. Some curious, some pitying, most expecting disaster. He stopped at the Phoenix's pilot door and looked back at Victoria. "One question, ma'am." "What?" "When I land this aircraft safely, are you going to honor your word, or should I expect you to find another excuse?" Her eyes narrowed to slits. "Just fly the damn helicopter, Mitchell." James opened the door and climbed in. The cockpit smelled like new leather and possibility. The instrument panel glowed with soft blue light, casting shadows across James's weathered face. His hands moved across the controls, checking systems, testing responses. Muscle memory. 30 years of it buried under 3 years of mopping floors and being invisible. But some things you never forget. Outside, Marcus ran up to the cockpit window. "Mitchell, wait. You don't have to do this. She's just angry. She doesn't mean—" "I know exactly what she means." James pulled on the helmet. "That's why I'm doing it." "But if you crash?" "I won't crash." Marcus stared at him through the glass. "How can you be so sure?" James smiled for the first time in 3 years. "Because I designed the stabilization algorithm you're using. Well, the military version anyway. I recognized my own work when you were testing it last year." Marcus's face went white. "What?" James closed the cockpit door. His hands moved through the startup sequence with practiced precision. Fuel pump, battery, master, starter. The turbine began to whine, building from a whisper to a scream. Through the canopy, James could see Victoria standing with her arms crossed, her face a mask of anger and something else. Doubt, maybe. Or the first whisper of fear that she'd made a terrible mistake. The rotor began to spin. James thought about Helen, his wife of 32 years, the woman who'd made him believe in second chances and Sunday morning pancakes and growing old together on a porch somewhere quiet. She'd been gone for 2 years now. Alzheimer's had eaten away her memories until she didn't know his name. Until she looked at him with empty eyes and asked who the nice man was who kept visiting her. Before that, when she was still herself, she used to say, "James, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've already done enough." But this wasn't about proving anything. This was about reminding himself who he used to be. Who he still was underneath the coveralls and the gray hair and the 3 years of being invisible. The Phoenix lifted off. It rose smoothly, precisely the way only a perfectly balanced aircraft can. James took it up to 50 feet, hovering over the exact center of the hangar. Below, the crowd stood frozen. Victoria's mouth was slightly open. Marcus had his hands pressed against his head. Then James did something they didn't expect. He executed a perfect pedal turn. 360 degrees. The helicopter rotating around its axis without drifting an inch. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God." James brought the Phoenix forward, accelerating across the hangar in a low pass that made several people duck. The turbine screamed as he pulled up into a climbing turn, the kind of aggressive maneuver that would expose any instability in the flight control system. The helicopter responded like it was reading his mind. He came around for landing, bleeding off speed, with precision, touching down on the exact spot he'd lifted off from. The skids kissed the concrete with barely a sound. The engine spooled down. The rotor slowed. Silence returned to the hangar. James removed his helmet and climbed out. The crowd stood like statues. Phones still recording. Mouths hanging open. He walked toward Victoria, his footsteps echoing in the silence. When he stopped in front of her, he reached into his coverall pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From the wallet, he removed a laminated card and held it out to her. Victoria took it with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the text. Her face went pale. "Colonel James Mitchell," she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "United States Army retired, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, Senior Instructor Pilot, Combat Flight Hours 4,847. She read it twice, 3 times. Then she looked up at James, her face drained of all color. "The Night Stalkers," Marcus whispered from somewhere in the crowd. "You flew with the Night Stalkers." James took the card back and returned it to his wallet. 28 years. Taught most of the pilots who flew the Bin Laden raid. Flew missions in Panama, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia. He paused. "Retired 6 years ago when my wife got sick. Needed to be home. Needed flexible hours. You had a job opening for maintenance." He met Victoria's eyes. "I took it." Victoria couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. James continued, his voice quiet but firm. "You want to know why none of your engineers would fly that helicopter? It's not because they're cowards. It's because they're smart. That bird is aggressive. It's designed for combat pilots who've been trained to handle instability. It's not meant for civilian test protocols." He gestured at the Phoenix. "You built something beautiful, Miss Sterling. But you're trying to sell it to people who don't understand what it is. That's not the helicopter's fault." He let the words hang in the air. "That's yours." The silence was crushing. Victoria Sterling, CEO of a billion-dollar aerospace company, stood speechless in front of a janitor who'd just exposed everything she didn't know about leadership, about respect, about the difference between power and strength. James picked up his mop. "I need to finish cleaning before I go home. My shift ends at 6. He turned and walked away. Behind him, Victoria finally found her voice. "Wait." It came out cracked, broken. "Please, wait." James stopped but didn't turn around. She walked toward him, her heels clicking in the silence. When she spoke, her voice was small, smaller than anyone had ever heard it. "I'm sorry." "For what, ma'am?" "For humiliating you, for making that stupid joke, for—" She gestured helplessly at the hangar, at the crowd, at the helicopter, at everything. "For all of it." James turned to face her. He studied her expression. He saw something he hadn't expected. Genuine shame. "You weren't joking, ma'am." "What?" "You weren't joking. You were trying to embarrass me in front of everyone because you were angry and scared and you needed someone weaker than you to hurt." He shook his head slowly. "That's different than a joke." The words hit her like a physical blow. Tears welled up in her eyes. "You're right," she whispered. "You're absolutely right." James looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his mop bucket and walked toward the storage closet. The video would be online within an hour. By morning it would have 50 million views. But James Mitchell wouldn't see it. He'd be at home eating dinner alone, looking at pictures of Helen from before the disease took her, wondering if he'd done the right thing, wondering if dignity was worth the cost of invisibility, wondering if just once being seen was worth the pain it brought. The apartment was quiet when James got home. He lived in a 2-bedroom unit on the east side of town, the kind of place where the pipes rattled when the neighbors flushed and the walls were thin enough to hear arguments 3 doors down. It was what he could afford after the bankruptcy, after selling everything that mattered, after watching 30 years of his life get reduced to storage unit clearance sales. He dropped his keys on the counter and loosened his work boots. His phone had been buzzing all evening. He'd turned off the notifications after the first 20. He didn't need to see what people were saying, didn't want to know. But curiosity was a cruel thing. James pulled out his phone and opened it. The screen lit up with notifications, hundreds of them. Messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years, friend requests from strangers, and one video that had been shared to him 47 times. He pressed play. There he was, climbing into the Phoenix. Victoria's voice sharp and mocking in the background. "Just fly the damn helicopter, Mitchell." Then the liftoff, smooth and controlled. The pedal turn that made the camera shake as whoever was filming tried to follow the movement. The landing, gentle as a whisper. The video had 32 million views. 32 million people had watched him in the last 6 hours. James set the phone down and walked to the refrigerator. Inside was leftover Chinese food from 3 days ago, a gallon of milk that was probably turning, and a 6-pack of beer that had been sitting there since Helen's funeral. He grabbed one, twisted off the cap, and took a long drink. The photo on the refrigerator door caught his eye. Helen. Before the disease. 50 years old in that picture, her hair just starting to show gray, her smile bright and real. She was holding a certificate, her master's degree in education, something she'd worked on for 6 years while teaching full-time. "I should have told them about you," James said to the photo. "Should have told that woman what it means to sacrifice everything for someone you love." The beer tasted like regret. His phone rang. James looked at the screen. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Same unknown number. On the 3rd call he answered. "Mitchell." "Colonel Mitchell." The voice was male. professional, cautious. "My name is David Park. I'm a reporter with the Washington Post. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about what happened today." James hung up. The phone rang again. Different number. He turned it off completely and sat in the dark drinking his beer, thinking about the moment when everything changed. It wasn't when Victoria made her offer. It wasn't when he flew the helicopter. It was earlier, 3 years ago, when he'd first walked into Sterling Aerospace and filled out the application, when he'd checked the box that said maintenance worker instead of the one that said technical consultant. The consultant job required references from the last 5 years. All James had from those years were medical bills and death certificates. He remembered the interview, a 25-year-old HR manager asking him questions from a script without ever looking up from her computer. "Do you have reliable transportation?" "Yes." "Can you work nights?" "Yes." "Do you have any physical limitations?" He'd almost mentioned the shrapnel scar on his left shoulder from Somalia, the knee that ached before rain, the nightmares that still woke him at 3 in the morning. But he just said, "No." "We can start you at $16 an hour." James had nodded. He needed $16 an hour more than he needed his pride. The knock on his door came at 7:30. James wasn't expecting anyone. He considered not answering. Let whoever it was think he wasn't home. But the knocking continued. Insistent. Almost desperate. He opened the door. Victoria Sterling stood in his hallway. She was still wearing her business suit, but she looked somehow smaller than she had in the hangar. The sharp edges had softened. The armor had cracked. Behind her stood Marcus Chen, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Miss Sterling?" James didn't move from the doorway. "How did you find my address?" "Employee records." She met his eyes. "Can we come in? Please?" James glanced at Marcus, who gave a small shrug that said this wasn't his idea. He stepped aside. They entered his apartment, and James watched Victoria's eyes take in the space. The worn furniture from Goodwill. The photos of Helen on every surface. The military certificates in cheap frames on the wall because he couldn't afford better ones. "Would you like something to drink?" James asked, defaulting to the hospitality his mother had beaten into him decades ago. "No, thank you." Victoria stood in the center of his living room like she didn't know what to do with her hands. "I came to apologize. Really apologize. Not the performative thing I did in the hangar." "You already apologized, ma'am." "Not well enough." She turned to face him fully. "What I did today was cruel. It was unprofessional. It was everything my father warned me not to become, and I did it anyway because I was angry and scared and I needed someone to hurt." James leaned against the kitchen counter. "Why are you scared?" The question seemed to surprise her. "What? You said you were scared. Why?" Victoria looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragement. She took a breath. "Because I'm failing." The word came out like a confession. The Phoenix Project was supposed to prove I could run this company. My father didn't think I could do it. The board doesn't think I can do it. Half the staff is waiting for me to crash and burn so they can say they knew all along that a woman couldn't handle this job. "So you became exactly what they expected," James said quietly. "Hard, cold, ruthless. You thought that's what it took to survive." "Yes," her voice cracked. "And I was wrong." Marcus spoke for the first time. "Colonel Mitchell, we need your help. Not just with the Phoenix, with everything." James looked between them. "I'm a janitor, Mr. Chen." "No, sir, you're not." Marcus pulled a folder from his bag. "You're a colonel with the 160th SOAR. You've forgotten more about helicopter operations than most of us will ever know." He opened the folder. "I spent the last 3 hours researching you. Do you know what I found?" James said nothing. "You're the James Mitchell. You wrote the tactical flight manual that every Army helicopter pilot studies. You developed the training protocols for night vision operations. You've got 47 military citations and 3 distinguished flying crosses. Marcus's voice rose with excitement. You flew the mission to extract those aid workers from Yemen in 2015, the one everyone said was impossible. That mission is classified. It was declassified last year. Sir, you're a legend, and you've been mopping our floors. James took another drink of his beer. Legends don't pay for groceries, Mr. Chen. $16 an hour does. Victoria stepped forward. What if it was more than $16 an hour? I don't want charity, ma'am. It's not charity, it's a job offer. She straightened her shoulders. Chief test pilot, $200,000 a year, full benefits, stock options. You'd oversee all flight testing, train our pilots, consult on design modifications. James laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're offering me a job because you feel guilty. I'm offering you a job because I need you. Because my company needs you. Because that helicopter you flew today is just the first of 5 projects in development, and all of them need someone who actually understands combat aviation. You humiliated me 6 hours ago, and now you want me to work for you. Yes. Victoria's voice was steady now, determined. I know how this looks. I know you have every reason to tell me to go to hell. But I'm asking anyway because I don't know what else to do. She paused. The board meeting is in 12 days. If I can't demonstrate that the Phoenix is flight ready with a qualified test pilot, they're going to vote me out and sell the company. Everything my father built, everything I've tried to build, gone. James studied her face. The desperation there was real. So was the fear. But there was something else too. Something he recognized from his own mirror. Exhaustion. The kind that comes from fighting battles you're not sure you can win. Why does it matter? He asked. The company, I mean. You're rich. You could walk away. Do something else. Because it's not about the money. Victoria's voice strengthened. My father died thinking I couldn't do this. He told me 2 weeks before his heart attack that I should sell the company and let someone competent run it. She paused. Those were his last words to me. Let someone competent run it. The room fell silent. I need to prove him wrong, Victoria whispered. Even if he's dead, even if it doesn't matter, I need to prove I could do this. James understood that need. He'd spent his entire military career proving he belonged. Proving he was good enough. Proving that the kid from rural Georgia with no college degree could fly circles around academy graduates. 200,000, he said slowly. That's a lot of money for a test pilot. It's market rate for someone with your qualifications. And if I say no, Victoria met his eyes. Then I'll thank you for your time, apologize again for my behavior and leave. I won't bother you again. Marcus added quickly, but sir, please consider it. Not for her. For the pilots who will fly these helicopters. They deserve the best training, the best protocols. They deserve someone who knows what real combat flight looks like. That hit harder than Victoria's desperation. James thought about the young pilots he'd trained over the years. Kids barely old enough to drink climbing into machines that could kill them if they made one wrong decision. He'd kept them alive by teaching them to respect the aircraft, to understand the margins between confidence and arrogance. I need to think about it, James said finally. Victoria nodded. That's fair. Take your time. How much time do I have? The board meeting is June 14th, 12 days. I'll give you an answer in 3. Victoria pulled a business card from her purse and set it on his counter. My personal cell is on there. Call anytime, day or night. They moved toward the door. Marcus shook James's hand. Thank you for considering it, sir. Really. Victoria paused at the threshold. Colonel Mitchell. Yes, ma'am. One more thing. She glanced back at the photos covering every surface of his apartment. I saw the photos of your wife. I'm sorry for your loss. James's throat tightened. Thank you. The medical bills. That's why you took the maintenance job. That's why I took the maintenance job. How much do you still owe? James hesitated. I don't think that's... Please, I need to know. He let out a long breath. 83,000, give or take. Victoria pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved across the screen for a few seconds. Then she looked up. It's gone. What? The debt. I just paid it. Wire transfer to the hospital billing department. You'll get a confirmation email in the morning. James's hands clenched. I don't want your money. It's not charity. Consider it back pay for 3 years of being underpaid and overqualified. Or consider it an apology. I don't care what you call it. She met his eyes. But you don't owe anyone anything anymore. Before James could respond, she was gone. Her heels clicked down the hallway, fading into silence. Marcus lingered in the doorway. She does that. Makes decisions fast. Doesn't ask permission. It's infuriating. He paused. And occasionally generous. She had no right. No, sir. She didn't. But the debt is gone anyway. What you do with that is up to you. Marcus left too. James stood in his doorway, his mind spinning. $83,000. Gone. Just like that. The weight he'd carried for 3 years. The reason he worked overtime. The reason he ate instant ramen 4 nights a week. The reason he'd sold Helen's jewelry piece by piece until there was nothing left but her wedding ring. Gone. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to feel insulted by the gesture. Instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Relief. James closed the door and walked to his bedroom. On the dresser was a wooden box, polished mahogany with brass corners. Helen had given it to him for their 25th anniversary. Inside were his military medals, his rank insignia, his flight wings. He opened it and stared at the contents. What should I do, Helen? He asked the empty room. Tell me what to do. But Helen was gone and the room offered no answers. James's phone buzzed. He'd forgotten to leave it off. He turned it back on without thinking. The screen showed a text from a number he didn't recognize. Colonel Mitchell, this is Jennifer Ramirez. I work in electrical engineering at Sterling. I was in the hangar today. I just wanted to say thank you for what you said about me. About my daughter. Nobody has ever acknowledged that before. It meant everything. James frowned. He hadn't said anything about anyone named Jennifer. Then he remembered. Victoria had gestured at him during her tirade. Asked him if he'd ever heard anyone volunteer to fly. He'd been mopping near a group of engineers at the time. Another text came through. Different number. Sir, this is Carlos Martinez from the fabrication shop. My son does have leukemia. You're the first person at work who knew. Thank you for seeing me. James stared at the phone. He hadn't said anything about Carlos either, but he'd heard the man talking to a coworker about treatments and hospital visits. He'd remembered. Another text, and another. People he'd worked beside for 3 years. Invisible to each other. Suddenly visible. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for knowing my name. Thank you for remembering. James sat on his bed and read every message. There were 47 of them by the time he stopped checking. 47 people saying the same thing in different words. Thank you for seeing me. The next morning, James drove to the cemetery. He visited every Sunday, but this was Thursday, and he needed to talk to someone who couldn't argue back. Helen's grave was simple. Gray granite, her name, her dates. And the inscription he'd chosen, she taught with love and lived with grace. He'd wanted to add more, wanted to capture everything she'd been. But the funeral home charged by the letter, and he'd run out of money. James sat on the grass beside the stone. Someone paid off your medical debt, he said. The CEO whose helicopter I flew. She just made it disappear. $83,000. Gone. A bird landed on Helen's headstone, then flew away. She offered me a job too. Real job, not maintenance. $200,000 a year. He laughed softly. Can you believe that $200,000? We could have used that money when you were sick. Could have tried the experimental treatments. Could have... His voice broke. But you're gone, and I don't know what to do with a second chance. Don't know if I deserve it. He wiped his eyes. I let you down, Helen. I couldn't save you. Couldn't afford the treatments that might have given us more time. The wind moved through the cemetery, rustling the leaves of a nearby oak. And now this woman I don't even like is offering me everything we needed. 3 years too late. He sat in silence for a long time. Rachel called yesterday. First time in 8 months. Rachel, their daughter, 31 years old and so angry at him she'd cut him out of her life. She saw the video. Said she was proud of me for standing up to that CEO. James pulled at a blade of grass. But you know what she didn't say? She didn't say she forgives me for giving up on you. She didn't say she understands why I pulled you off the trial medication when we ran out of money. He threw the grass aside. She didn't say she's sorry for blaming me for something I couldn't control. His phone rang. Unknown number again. He almost didn't answer, but something made him press accept. Mitchell? Colonel Mitchell. The voice was female this time. Authoritative. Familiar somehow. This is General Patricia Morrison, Army Aviation Command. You got a minute? James sat up straighter. Yes, ma'am. I saw the video. Hell, everyone's seen the video. That was some damn fine flying colonel. Made the 160th look good. Thank you, ma'am. I'm calling because we have a problem. You know the contract with Sterling Aerospace for the new tactical helicopters. The Phoenix MH-7. That's the one. We've got 12 on order, another 36 pending successful evaluation. But our test pilots have concerns about the flight characteristics. She paused. The Army needs someone we trust to evaluate that aircraft, someone with real combat experience. James's pulse quickened. Ma'am, I'm retired. I know, but we need an independent assessment, contract work, civilian consultant, 3 weeks full evaluation written report. The Army will pay consultant rates, $1,500 a day plus expenses. That's $45,000. That's what we pay for expertise. You interested? James looked at Helen's grave. The bird had returned. It was perched on top of the stone watching him. Can I think about it, ma'am? You've got 24 hours. Call my office with your answer. She paused. And Colonel, I served with your wife, Helen Mitchell. She was our chief education officer at Fort Rucker before she retired. Best damn teacher I ever had. James's chest tightened. I'm sorry for your loss. The general hung up. James stared at his phone. He'd forgotten that Helen and General Morrison had served together. Forgotten that his wife had been decorated too in her own way. She'd taught thousands of soldiers, shaped careers, saved lives by making people better at their jobs. You knew, James said to the headstone. You knew I'd need to figure this out on my own. He stood and brushed the grass from his pants. I'm going to take the job. Both jobs. The words surprised him even as he said them. Not because I need the money anymore. Because those kids in that hangar deserve better than they're getting. Because Victoria Sterling needs to learn what real leadership looks like. He paused. And because if I don't start living again, what was the point of surviving? James kissed his fingers and touched them to Helen's name. I love you. Always will. But I think you'd want me to stop hiding. Stop being invisible. Stop punishing myself for something I couldn't control. The bird flew away. James walked back to his car. That afternoon, he called Victoria's personal number. She answered on the first ring. Colonel Mitchell. I'll take the job. He heard her exhale. But I have conditions. Name them. First, I want you to give everyone in maintenance a 20% raise. Not because of what happened yesterday, because they're underpaid and you know it. Done. What else? Second, I want to meet with every employee in your company, one-on-one. Learn their names, learn their stories. It'll take time, but if I'm going to be part of your leadership team, I need to understand who I'm working with. Silence on the line. That's a lot of meetings. You said you wanted to do better. This is how you do better. You learn who people are. More silence. Then, okay, what's the third condition? You work 1 day a week in maintenance, with me. Excuse me. You mop floors, you clean bathrooms, you empty trash, you see what it's like to be invisible. You're serious. Completely serious. If you want me to teach you about leadership, you start at the bottom. Same place I've been for 3 years. The silence stretched longer this time. James waited. When do I start? Victoria asked. This Saturday, 6 a.m. Wear clothes you don't mind ruining. I'll be there. One more thing, Miss Sterling. Yes. Stop trying to prove your father wrong. He let that sink in. Start trying to prove yourself right. There's a difference. Victoria's voice was quiet when she answered. How do I do that? That's what I'm going to teach you. James hung up and looked around his small apartment. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow he'd stop being invisible. Tomorrow he'd start teaching again. But tonight he sat in the dark and let himself grieve. For everything that was gone. For everything that might have been. One last time. Saturday morning arrived cold and dark. James stood in the Sterling Aerospace parking lot at 5:50, holding 2 cups of coffee and wondering if Victoria would actually show up. At 5:58, a black Mercedes pulled into the lot. Victoria stepped out wearing jeans, a plain t-shirt and sneakers that looked like they'd never touched pavement before. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, no jewelry except a watch that probably cost more than James's car. She walked over and took the coffee he offered. I wasn't sure you'd really make me do this. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. I keep my promises, Colonel Mitchell. We'll see about that. And it's James. If we're going to be cleaning toilets together, you can use my first name. They walked into the building together. The maintenance supervisor, a man named Frank Torres, who'd worked at Sterling for 20 years, looked up from his desk with undisguised shock. Miss Sterling, what are you doing here? Learning. She extended her hand. Frank, right? You've been here since my father ran the company. Frank blinked clearly, unsure if this was some kind of test. Yes, ma'am. 22 years next month. I should have known that. I'm sorry I didn't. She kept her hand out until Frank shook it. It's good to properly meet you. Frank looked at James like this might be an elaborate prank. James grabbed 2 mop buckets and handed one to Victoria. We start in the executive bathrooms. Figured you should see what your own facilities look like from the other side. Victoria took the bucket without complaint. For the next 4 hours, James put her through every task he'd done for 3 years. Scrubbing toilets, mopping floors, emptying trash bins filled with coffee cups and discarded documents, cleaning the break room microwave that someone had exploded chili in and never bothered to wipe down. She didn't complain, didn't make jokes, just worked. Her movements got more efficient as the morning wore on. She stopped looking at her hands like they belonged to someone else and started using them like tools. Around 10 o'clock, they took a break in the maintenance storage room. Victoria sat on an overturned bucket, her hands raw and red from cleaning chemicals. My manicurist is going to have questions, she said, examining her nails. Your manicurist is going to have a lot of questions about a lot of things after this week. Victoria looked up at him. Why are you really doing this? It's not just about teaching me humility. James leaned against the wall. Because 3 years ago I walked into this building as Colonel James Mitchell, decorated combat pilot, expert in aviation systems, trainer of the best helicopter pilots in the world. He paused. And I walked out as Jim the janitor. What changed? The uniform. That's it. I was the same person with the same knowledge and the same experience. But the uniform changed, and suddenly I was invisible. Victoria was quiet. People walked past me without seeing me, James continued. Talked over me like I wasn't there. Made decisions about aircraft I knew better than anyone, and never once thought to ask my opinion. He met her eyes. You're not the only one who did that. Everyone did. Even the people who seemed nice. Even the ones who said good morning sometimes. Because when you're invisible, people's kindness is just noise. It doesn't change anything. Victoria's voice was small. I see you now. Do you, or do you see a colonel who can save your company? She didn't answer right away. Both, she admitted finally. But I'm trying to see the person too. The man who lost his wife. The father who still eats alone every night. The teacher who misses having students. James was surprised by the accuracy of that. How did you know about the teaching part? I did more research. Found some of your former students. They talk about you like you walked on water. She shifted on her bucket. One of them, a Captain Williams, said you were the only instructor who treated him like he had a brain. Said you saved his life in Afghanistan by teaching him to trust his instincts over his instruments during a brownout landing. David Williams, good kid. Had a tendency to overthink his approach patterns, but once he learned to trust himself, he was solid. He's training new pilots at Fort Rucker now, using your methods. James felt something loosen in his chest. I'm glad to hear it. He also said you should never have retired. Said the Army lost its best instructor when you left. The Army didn't have a choice. I did. Because of Helen. Because of Helen, James confirmed. She needed me more than the Army did. That's not a difficult decision when you love someone. Victoria looked down at her damaged hands. I've never loved anyone like that. Never let myself. Why not? My father used to say, love was a distraction from success. She laughed bitterly. I think I believed him. That's a lonely way to live. It is, she whispered. It really is. They finished the shift in silence, working side by side. By noon, Victoria looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical labor. As they were cleaning up, Frank approached them. Miss Sterling, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you really doing this? Is this some kind of publicity stunt? Because if it is, I need to know. His voice hardened. These people. He gestured toward the maintenance staff gathering for lunch. They're good people. They don't deserve to be used. Victoria straightened. It's not a stunt. I'm doing this because I need to understand what I've been ignoring for 4 years. And because Colonel Mitchell is right. I've been measuring everything wrong. Frank studied her face for a long moment. Okay. But just so you know, if this is an act, we'll figure it out. We always do. It's not an act, Victoria said firmly. I promise you it's not. That Monday, James started his new position as chief test pilot. His office was on the 3rd floor with windows overlooking the hangar. There was a desk, a computer certificates on the wall that someone had already hung up. His name on the door in brass letters. He stood in the doorway, unable to make himself walk in. Marcus found him there. Everything okay, sir? This office. It's bigger than my apartment. You've earned it. Have I? I flew one helicopter for 10 minutes. That earns me an office with a view. Marcus smiled. No. 30 years of service earns you that. The helicopter was just how we found out about it. He stepped into the office. The team is gathering in conference room B. They're excited to meet you. Excited? Well, excited and terrified. Why terrified? Because you're a legend, sir. Half these engineers grew up reading about Night Stalker missions. They're about to meet someone who actually flew them. The conference room was packed when James walked in. 30 engineers, technicians, and designers all watching him with expressions ranging from awe to anxiety. James stood at the head of the table. I'm going to start by telling you what I'm not. The room went silent. I'm not here to tell you that your designs are wrong. I'm not here to make you feel stupid. And I'm sure as hell not here to be worshipped because I'm old and have some medals. A few nervous laughs. What I am here to do is bridge the gap between what you design on computers and what actually happens when someone has to fly it in the real world. when they're tired, when they're scared, when the mission is going sideways and they need their aircraft to keep them alive. He looked around the room. So I'm going to ask you questions. A lot of questions. And when I do, I need you to be honest with me. If you don't know something, say so. If you're guessing, tell me you're guessing. If you made a design choice because your boss told you to, even though you thought it was wrong, I need to know that too. One of the younger engineers raised her hand tentatively. Colonel Mitchell, I'm Amy Chen. I designed the Phoenix's control interface. I have about 1,000 questions about how it felt to fly. Good. Write them down. We'll go through every one. James pulled out a chair and sat down deliberately, making himself less imposing. But first I need you all to understand something. He paused. Yesterday I scrubbed toilets with your CEO. Next week I'll be doing it again. The week after that probably the same. He let that sink in. You know why. Silence. Because the person who empties your trash can see things you can't see from up here. They see the crumpled designs you threw away, the frustrated notes, the arguments you have when you think nobody's listening. He leaned forward. They see the truth of how this place really works. His eyes moved around the room. For 3 years I saw all of that. I saw you, Amy, stay late every Tuesday working on that interface. I saw you, Marcus, argue with the project manager about the hydraulic system redundancy. He pointed at a man in the back. I don't know your name, but I saw you cry in your car after a meeting where someone shot down your design idea. The man's face went red. That was 18 months ago. I remember. You sat in your car for 40 minutes. I was emptying the trash from the outdoor bins. I didn't know what happened, but I knew someone had hurt you. The room was completely silent now. So here's what I'm proposing, James continued. We're going to redesign how this company works, not the org chart, not the reporting structure, how we actually talk to each other, how we make decisions, how we value input from everyone, not just the people with fancy titles. Miss Sterling approved this, someone asked. Miss Sterling is learning to scrub toilets. I think she'll approve anything that makes this company better. Marcus spoke up. Sir, the board meeting is in 9 days. We need to demonstrate that the Phoenix is flight ready with a full test protocol. That's a lot to accomplish while redesigning company culture. Then we'd better get started. James turned to Amy. I need you to walk me through every decision you made on that control interface. Everything. We're going to test it, break it, and make it better. He addressed the rest of the room. The rest of you, I need documentation on every system, every component, every design choice that went into the Phoenix. Not the official documentation. The real story. What worked, what didn't, what you wish you could have done differently. An older engineer in the corner raised his hand. Colonel, I'm Howard Benson. I've been designing aircraft for 30 years. What you're asking for will take weeks. We don't have weeks. You're right, so we're going to work differently. James stood. Who here has kids? About half the hands went up. Okay, all of you go home by 5 every day. No exceptions. Your kids need you more than this project does. Shocked silence. Everyone else, I need you comfortable working odd hours. Some of you work better at night, some in the morning. I don't care when you work as long as the work gets done and gets done right. But Miss Sterling requires everyone to be here during core hours. Someone started. Miss Sterling doesn't run this project. I do. And I'm telling you that I trust you to manage your own time. If that trust is misplaced, we'll revisit. But I'm betting it's not. The meeting ran for 3 hours. By the end, James had a whiteboard covered in notes, a team that looked energized instead of terrified, and the beginning of a plan. As people filed out, Amy approached him. Colonel Mitchell, thank you for what you said about seeing us. Nobody has ever acknowledged that we're people with lives outside this building. You're welcome. And it's James. We're colleagues now. She smiled. Then you should call me Amy, and I should tell you something. Her smile faded. The control interface has a problem I've been trying to fix for 6 months. But the project manager keeps saying we don't have time. What kind of problem? The 0.3-second lag you felt when you flew. It's intentional like you said, but it's also wrong. James's eyes sharpened. Show me. They spent the next 2 hours in the simulation lab. Amy pulled up the interface code and pointed to a section on the screen. See this? When the pilot makes a rapid control input, there's a lag while the system confirms the input is intentional and not a sensor error. It's only 0.3 seconds, but in combat, 0.3 seconds is the difference between living and dying. Amy nodded. I felt that when I flew, James said. Thought it was intentional. It is intentional, but it's also wrong. A better system would learn the pilot's input patterns and adjust the confirmation threshold based on context. Why hasn't this been fixed? Because implementing it would require rewriting about 40,000 lines of code, and we're already behind schedule. James looked at the code on the screen. It was elegant, efficient, and exactly the kind of thing that got people killed. How long would the rewrite take if you had help? With the right team, maybe 2 weeks. You have 9 days. Get your team together. Pull whoever you need from other projects. I'll handle the project manager. Amy's eyes widened. You're serious? I'm serious. This bird is going to the military, Amy. Real pilots are going to fly it in real combat. I'm not sending them up in something that could get them killed because we didn't have time to fix a known problem. The board won't like it. We're supposed to be in final testing. The board isn't flying the helicopter. We are. Get your team. Amy practically ran from the room. James pulled out his phone and called Victoria. She answered immediately. James, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but I'm pulling engineers from the final testing schedule to fix a problem with the control system. Your project manager is going to be upset. I need you to back me up. What's the problem? He explained Amy's discovery. Victoria listened without interrupting. You're right, she said when he finished. Fix it. I'll handle the project manager. Anything else? Yeah. How are your hands? He could hear the smile in her voice. Covered in bandages. My assistant asked if I'd taken up boxing. I told her I was learning to be useful. Good answer. I'll see you Saturday. James. Yeah. Thank you for teaching me. We're just getting started. The next 9 days blurred together. James worked 16-hour days, splitting his time between reviewing designs, running simulations, and conducting one-on-one meetings with every employee in the company. He met with janitors and executives, engineers and administrative assistants. He learned names, learned stories, learned the hidden infrastructure of how Sterling Aerospace really worked. He met Jennifer Ramirez, the electrical engineer who worked 2 jobs to support her daughter because her ex-husband didn't pay child support. He lives in a 4,000-square-foot house, she told James, her voice tight with controlled anger. I live in a studio apartment, but somehow he can't afford $300 a month. How old is your daughter? 7. Her name is Sophia. She wants to be an astronaut. Good dream. Yeah. If I can keep her in a school that teaches her science instead of just warehousing her until 3 o'clock. James wrote it down. He met Carlos Martinez, the fabrication specialist whose son had leukemia. The treatments are working, Carlos said, his eyes wet. But the bills keep coming. Insurance covers 80%. You know what 80% of $100,000 leaves you with? $20,000. Every 3 months, I've been sleeping in my car some nights, saving on rent. Every dollar goes to Miguel. James wrote that down too. He met 47 people that first week, heard 47 stories, filled 3 notebooks with names and details, and the quiet desperation that people carried when they thought nobody was watching. Then he brought those notebooks to Victoria. She read them in her office while James sat across from her. When she finished, she looked up with tears in her eyes. I didn't know any of this. Now you do. What do I do with it? You fix what you can fix. You can't solve everyone's problems, but you can make their lives a little less hard. Victoria stared at the notebooks. Jennifer needs childcare. Carlos needs better insurance. Jennifer needs her ex-husband to stop being a deadbeat. But since you can't fix that, childcare is a start. And Carlos? The insurance policy has a cap on out-of-pocket expenses. Raise it. Cover chronic illness at 90% instead of 80%. That'll cost the company less than replacing Carlos when he burns out. He's your best fabrication specialist. You know what happens to your production schedule if he quits? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I never thought about it that way. Most people don't. They see line items on a budget. They don't see the people those numbers represent. She closed the notebooks. I'll make the changes. Monday. Good. James stood to leave. James. He turned. My father never would have done this. Never would have sat in this office reading about employees' problems. Never would have cared. I know. Is that why you're teaching me? Because you think I can be different from him? James considered the question. I'm teaching you because I think you already are different. You just haven't figured it out yet. Amy's team completed the control system rewrite in 8 days. James tested it in the simulator and felt the difference immediately. The helicopter responded like it was reading his mind. The lag was gone, replaced by smooth, intuitive control. This is perfect, he told Amy. This is exactly what it needed. She beamed. We pulled 4 all-nighters, but it was worth it to hear you say that. Don't pull all-nighters on my account. I need you sharp, not exhausted. We wanted to. Amy's voice caught. We've never had someone believe in our work like this, like it actually mattered. It does matter. It always mattered. People just forgot to tell you. The day before the board meeting, James conducted the final test flight. The entire company gathered in the hangar to watch. Victoria stood next to Marcus, her hands shaking, despite her best efforts to appear calm. James climbed into the Phoenix and ran through his pre-flight checks. Everything was perfect. Amy's interface was flawless. The hydraulic system Marcus had fought for worked beautifully. Every component, every system, every line of code represented someone's dedication, someone's expertise, someone's quiet excellence. He took the helicopter up and put it through maneuvers that made the engineers gasp. Combat turns, auto-rotation simulations, precision hovers at dangerous altitudes. He pushed the Phoenix to its limits and found that its limits were extraordinary. When he landed, the hangar erupted in cheers. James climbed out and walked directly to Victoria. Your helicopter is perfect. Better than perfect. It's going to save lives. She threw her arms around him. The gesture surprised them both. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Thank the team. They built this. I just showed them how to see what they'd already accomplished. That night, James sat in his apartment with a glass of whiskey and his phone. He opened his photos and found one of Helen from their anniversary 15 years ago. She was laughing at something he'd said, her whole face bright with joy. We did it, he told the photo. We saved the company, saved the jobs, maybe saved some lives down the road when those helicopters go into service. He took a sip of whiskey. But I still miss you. Still wish you were here to see this. His phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. They'd been talking more lately. Tentative conversations. Rebuilding what had been broken. Dad, I saw the news coverage. I'm proud of you. Can we talk this weekend? James typed back. I'd like that. Another text came through, this one from Marcus. Sir, the board meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Miss Sterling wants you there. Prepare for questions. James finished his whiskey and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, he felt like himself again. Not invisible, not diminished. Just James Mitchell, doing the work he was meant to do. The boardroom was designed to intimidate. 20 feet of mahogany table, leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, like a reminder of everything that could be lost. 12 board members sat in their positions of power. Men and women in expensive suits, with expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. James stood at the door in his test pilot uniform, the one he'd worn for yesterday's flight. Victoria had offered to get him a suit, but he'd declined. These people needed to see him as he was, not dressed up to meet their expectations. Victoria sat at the head of the table in her father's old seat. She wore a navy suit that made her look older, more severe. But James noticed her hands were folded tight enough that her knuckles had gone white. "Miss Sterling?" The oldest board member began speaking before anyone else could. His name was Gerald Hutchinson, and according to Marcus, he'd been trying to force Victoria out since her father died. "We've reviewed the Phoenix Project status. I believe we're ready to discuss the vote." "Actually, Gerald, we're not." Victoria's voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I have a presentation first, and I've invited Colonel James Mitchell to answer any technical questions you might have." Hutchinson's eyes landed on James with undisguised contempt. "The janitor who flew your helicopter. This is your expert witness." James walked to the table and placed his service record in front of Hutchinson. "Colonel James Mitchell, U.S. Army retired. 160 hours of combat flight time. 3 distinguished flying crosses. Senior instructor pilot for the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Designer of the current tactical flight protocols used by Army Aviation." He met Hutchinson's eyes without flinching. "And yes, until recently I also mopped the floors of this building. Both things can be true." Hutchinson's face reddened. Before he could respond, another board member spoke up. Catherine Wilkes, a woman in her 60s, who'd made her fortune in defense contracting. "Colonel Mitchell, I've heard of you. You trained my nephew before his deployment to Afghanistan. He credits you with saving his life." "What's his name?" "Lieutenant James Wilkes." James allowed himself a small smile. "Jimmy. Good kid. Had a tendency to overthink his approach patterns. But once he learned to trust his instincts, he was solid." "How's he doing?" "He's a captain now, still flying, still using what you taught him." "I'm glad to hear it." Catherine turned to Hutchinson. "I think we should hear what the colonel has to say about our helicopter Gerald. His credentials seem adequate." Hutchinson waved dismissively. "Fine, let's get this over with. Miss Sterling, your presentation?" Victoria stood and pulled up a display on the screen. 3 weeks ago, this company was in crisis. We had a $28 million helicopter that no one would fly. We had military contracts worth $400 million at risk. We had a board ready to vote me out and sell the company. She clicked to the next slide showing footage of James's test flight. Then this happened. The room watched in silence as James flew the Phoenix through maneuvers that would challenge any pilot. Colonel Mitchell flew the Phoenix MH-7 in a demonstration that has been viewed over 80 million times worldwide. Within 48 hours, we received inquiries from 6 additional countries interested in purchasing our aircraft. Another click. This one showed a graph of media mentions and stock price. Our stock is up 37%. We've been featured in every major aerospace publication. The Army has accelerated its evaluation timeline and is considering increasing its initial order from 12 units to 30. Hutchinson leaned back in his chair. "All very impressive, but none of that matters if the helicopter doesn't pass military certification. We need an independent evaluation, not a viral video. Which is why I'm here." James stepped forward. "General Patricia Morrison from Army Aviation Command contacted me 2 weeks ago. She asked me to conduct an independent assessment of the Phoenix MH-7 on behalf of the military." He pulled a thick document from his briefcase and set it on the table. "I've spent the last 14 days putting that aircraft through every test scenario in the Army's evaluation protocol. This is my report." He paused. "Bottom line, the Phoenix MH-7 is the most advanced tactical helicopter I've ever flown. It exceeds military specifications in every measurable category. I'm recommending the Army proceed with full procurement." The room fell silent. Catherine picked up the report and began flipping through it. Hutchinson found his voice first. You expect us to believe that a helicopter you helped develop is perfect? You're hardly an unbiased source. I didn't help develop it, James corrected. I watched it being developed while I cleaned toilets. There's a difference. A few surprised laughs from around the table. And I didn't say it was perfect. I said it exceeds specifications. There are still improvements I've recommended, all documented in that report. Another board member spoke up, a younger man named David Chen. Colonel Mitchell, can you elaborate on these improvements? Are they critical to flight safety? No. The aircraft is safe as designed. The improvements are about optimizing performance. For example, the control interface had a 0.3-second lag that we've now eliminated. The aircraft was safe with the lag, but it's better without it. Hutchinson seized on the word. You've been making modifications to a completed design without board approval. Victoria stood. I approved the modifications. As CEO, that's within my authority. Colonel Mitchell identified issues that would have become problems during military evaluation. We fixed them before they became critical. You exceeded your authority. I used my authority to ensure this company delivers the best possible product to our customers. That's exactly what my job is. The argument escalated. Board members took sides. Voices rose. James watched Victoria hold her ground, saw her refuse to back down, noticed the way she'd changed in 3 weeks from someone who ruled by fear to someone who led with conviction. Catherine Wilkes finally raised her hand for silence. Enough. I want to hear from Colonel Mitchell. Not about specifications or modifications. She folded her hands on the table. I want to know what kind of company you've observed in your time here. The room quieted. All eyes turned to James. 3 weeks ago, this company was broken. He let that land. Not the products. The products were good. The people were broken. They were scared of making mistakes, scared of their leadership, scared of each other. They'd stopped communicating honestly because honesty got punished. He looked at Victoria. Your CEO was part of that problem. She ruled by intimidation. She measured people by their titles instead of their contributions. She made a public mockery of an employee because she was angry and scared and needed someone to hurt. Victoria's face went pale, but she didn't interrupt. But then something happened, James continued. She learned. She changed. She spent the last 3 weeks working alongside the people she used to ignore. She listened to the engineers she used to bully. She fixed problems instead of hiding them. He paused. And she did something I didn't think she had in her. She admitted she was wrong. He turned back to the board. I've served under a lot of commanders in my career. Some were brilliant strategists. Some were courageous under fire. But the best ones, the ones I'd follow anywhere, were the ones who could admit when they screwed up and then do better. His voice hardened. Miss Sterling is becoming that kind of leader. Hutchinson shook his head. This is absurd. We're not running a therapy session here. We're running a billion-dollar corporation. Miss Sterling has shown poor judgment, poor leadership, and poor results until very recently. The fact that she hired the right consultant doesn't change her track record. You're right. Victoria's voice cut through the murmuring. Everyone turned to her. I did show poor judgment. I did fail at leadership. Everything you just said about me is true. Hutchinson looked surprised by the admission. But here's what else is true. Victoria stood and walked around the table. In 3 weeks, I've learned more about running this company than I did in 4 years of doing it my father's way. I've learned that people work harder when they're respected than when they're afraid. I've learned that the best ideas come from listening, not commanding. I've learned that being strong doesn't mean being cruel. She stopped at the windows. My father built this company on fear and intimidation. It worked for him because he was brilliant and ruthless, and he surrounded himself with people too scared to challenge him. She turned to face the board. I tried to be him, and I nearly destroyed everything he built. The room was silent. But I'm not him. I'm never going to be him. And maybe that's exactly what this company needs. Someone who leads differently. Someone who sees the janitor as a colonel, the single mother as a dedicated engineer, the fabrication worker as a human being with a sick child. Her voice strengthened. These people aren't just numbers on a payroll. They're human beings with stories. And I finally started learning those stories. She walked back to her seat. So here's what I'm proposing. Give me 6 months. 6 months to prove that this new approach works. If our performance drops, if we lose contracts, if we fail to deliver, then vote me out. I won't fight it. She met each board member's eyes in turn. But if we succeed, if we grow, if we become the kind of company people want to work for, instead of the kind they tolerate, then trust that I know what I'm doing. Catherine looked at the other board members. I think that's fair. 6 months isn't unreasonable. It's ridiculous, Hutchinson countered. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. We can't gamble on Miss Sterling's personal growth journey. We're not gambling, David Chen said. We're investing. There's a difference. I move that we table the vote for 6 months and allow Miss Sterling to continue in her role with quarterly performance reviews. I second, Catherine added. Hutchinson's face was red with anger. This is a mistake. Mark my words. In 6 months, we'll be back here having the same conversation, except the company will be in worse shape. Then we'll deal with it then, Catherine said. All in favor. 7 hands went up. 5 remained down. Hutchinson's was among them. Motion carries, Catherine announced. Miss Sterling, you have your 6 months. Don't waste them. Victoria's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. I won't. The board members filed out. Some stopped to shake James's hand. Others left without a word. Hutchinson was the last to leave, pausing at the door. Colonel Mitchell, a word of advice. James turned. When this all falls apart, and it will, don't let her take you down with her. You seem like a decent man. You deserve better. James met his eyes. Mr. Hutchinson, I've survived 3 wars and the death of my wife. I think I can handle a few months of corporate politics. When they were alone, Victoria collapsed into a chair. I thought they were going to vote me out. I was so sure. They almost did. Hutchinson had the votes lined up before you walked in. What changed their minds? You did. You told the truth. You showed them you could be different. Victoria looked up at him. You changed their minds. You gave me credibility I didn't have. No. James sat across from her. You earned that credibility by actually changing. If you'd walked in there still acting like you did 3 weeks ago, my recommendation wouldn't have mattered. They saw something different in you. I feel different. She pressed her hands to her face. Lighter somehow. Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't know was there, and someone finally took it off my shoulders. That's what happens when you stop trying to be someone else and start being yourself. Victoria lowered her hands and looked at him with an expression James couldn't quite read. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Why did you stay after I humiliated you in front of everyone? After I treated you like you were worthless? Why didn't you just quit and find another job? James thought about that. Because I needed the work. Because I have bills to pay and a daughter who deserves better than a father drowning in debt. He paused. But also because I recognized something in you that day. What? Fear. The same fear I saw in young pilots right before their first combat mission. The fear of not being good enough. Of failing. Of proving everyone right who said you couldn't do it. Victoria's eyes glistened. I've spent my career helping people get past that fear, James said. Couldn't really stop just because I changed jobs. You're a teacher at heart. Helen used to say the same thing, said I was wasted just flying, said I needed students to make sense of what I knew. She was right. Yeah, she usually was. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Victoria's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and smiled. It's Jennifer, from accounting. She says the daycare program applications opened this morning and she's already enrolled Sophia. Her voice caught. She's crying, happy crying. She says thank you. You did a good thing there. We did a good thing. You're the one who told me about her situation. I just pointed it out. You fixed it. Victoria set down her phone. James, I need to tell you something. The military evaluation. General Morrison called me this morning. James straightened. She said your report was the most thorough assessment they've ever received. She's recommending immediate approval for procurement. Full order. 48 units with option for 96 more. James felt something loosen in his chest. That's excellent news. It's more than excellent. It saves this company. It validates everything we've built. It means jobs are safe. Contracts are secured. She met his eyes. It means I get my 6 months to prove myself, but the pressure's off. We've already won. You've won. This was your project, your vision. I just helped test it. You did more than test it. You fixed the culture that was killing it. You taught me how to lead. Victoria's voice caught. You saved us, James. All of us. His phone rang before he could respond. Rachel's name on the screen. I should take this, my daughter. Of course, go. James stepped into the hallway and answered. Rachel. Dad. Her voice was thick with emotion. Dad, I saw the news. I saw what you did. I saw what that woman said about you in that video. Rachel, it's okay. It's not okay. She treated you like garbage. After everything you've done, everything you sacrificed, she treated you like you were nothing. She didn't know who I was. She should have treated you with respect anyway. That's the whole point. You shouldn't have to be a decorated war hero to deserve basic human dignity. James leaned against the wall. You're right. You're absolutely right. Rachel was crying now. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for how I treated you after Mom died, for blaming you, for not understanding that you did everything you could. Sweetheart, I was angry and hurt, and I took it out on you, and that was wrong. James's throat tightened. Rachel, you don't have to. I do have to. I've been watching what you've been doing these last 3 weeks, teaching that CEO how to be a better person, helping all those people, being exactly who Mom always said you were, someone who makes everyone around him better. Her voice broke. And I've been sitting here nursing a grudge for 2 years over something you couldn't control. Rachel, can I come see you this weekend? Please? I need to apologize in person. I need to tell you I'm proud of you. I need to hug my dad and tell him I love him. James wiped his eyes. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. Saturday morning I'll drive down. Saturday's good. I'll make breakfast. Your mom's recipe for pancakes. The ones with chocolate chips? Is there any other kind? Rachel laughed through her tears. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. See you Saturday. He ended the call and stood there for a moment, letting the emotion wash over him. Behind him, he heard Victoria quietly close her office door, giving him privacy. Marcus approached carefully from the other end of the hallway. Good news, sir. My daughter. We haven't really talked in 2 years. She's coming to visit. That's wonderful. Yeah. James took a shaky breath. Yeah, it really is. That evening, James returned to his apartment to find a package outside his door. No return address. Just his name in Victoria's handwriting. Inside was a framed photograph. It showed the Phoenix MH7 in flight. The image captured at the exact moment of James's pedal turn. The helicopter suspended in perfect balance against a blue sky. Below the image was a small plaque. To Colonel James Mitchell, teacher, leader, friend, thank you for showing us how to fly. The team at Sterling Aerospace. At the bottom, in smaller text, we see you now, we always will. James set the frame on his dresser next to the photo of Helen. He stood there looking at both images, his past and his present, his loss and his redemption. I think I'm going to be okay. He told Helen's picture. I think we both are. He took a breath. Rachel's coming home. The job is good. People are learning. It's not the life we planned, but it's a good life. He thought he saw Helen smile back at him, but maybe that was just the light. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Thank you for today. For everything. I couldn't have done it without you. James typed back. You did the hard part. You changed. That was all you. 3 dots appeared. Then her response. My father never would have hired you. He would have seen the coveralls and looked right through you. I almost did the same thing. James thought for a moment before replying. But you didn't. You listened. You learned. That's the difference between who you were and who you're becoming. A long pause. Then, I want to be worthy of what you've taught me. I want to be the kind of leader you can be proud of. James smiled. You're already getting there. Just keep going. He set down his phone and looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, 47 people were sleeping better tonight because someone had finally seen them. A company was saved. A daughter was coming home. And an old man who'd spent 3 years being invisible had remembered who he was. James Mitchell wasn't a janitor anymore. He wasn't even a colonel, really. He was something better. A teacher who'd finally found his students. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. James stood in his kitchen at 6:30, mixing pancake batter the way Helen used to make it. Extra vanilla. A pinch of cinnamon. Chocolate chips that he'd fold in at the last moment so they wouldn't melt too much. Rachel wasn't due until 9, but he'd been awake since 4, too nervous to sleep. He couldn't remember the last time his daughter had voluntarily come to see him. Couldn't remember the last time they'd shared a meal that wasn't awkward with unspoken grief hanging over every bite. The knock came at 8:15. James opened the door to find Rachel standing there with tears already streaming down her face. She was 31 now, looked so much like Helen that it sometimes hurt to see her. She'd driven 3 hours from Portland, probably left before dawn. Dad! That was all she managed before she threw her arms around him. James held his daughter and felt something break open in his chest. All the anger she'd carried, all the blame she'd heaped on him for not saving Helen, for giving up too soon, for choosing economics over experimental treatments. None of it mattered in that moment. I'm sorry, Rachel sobbed into his shoulder. I'm so sorry for everything I said, for not calling, for making you feel like you failed Mom when you gave her everything. Shh, it's okay. We both said things. We both hurt. But I watched that video, Dad. I watched that woman treat you like you were nothing, and I realized I'd been doing the same thing. She pulled back her face wet and raw. Making you small because I was angry at God or fate or whatever took Mom away. And that was wrong. You deserved better from me. James guided her inside and handed her a tissue. Your mother got sick. That wasn't anyone's fault. I did what I could with what we had. Sometimes that's not enough, and you have to live with it. Rachel wiped her eyes and noticed the kitchen. You're making her pancakes. Thought you might be hungry. I haven't had these in 3 years. Then we're overdue. They cooked together in comfortable silence, falling into the rhythm they'd had before Helen got sick. Rachel set the table while James worked the griddle. She poured coffee while he plated the food. Small acts of normalcy that felt like coming home. Over breakfast, Rachel asked about everything. About the viral video, about Victoria, about the job, about the last 3 years of his life that she'd missed because she was too angry to ask. James told her the truth, about mopping floors while engineers discussed designs he could have improved, about eating dinner alone every night, about visiting Helen's grave and talking to a headstone because he had no one else to talk to. I should have been there, Rachel said quietly. You were dealing with your own grief, and I abandoned you. You were dealing with your grief too. Everyone does that differently. But you were dealing with it alone. That's not okay. James reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not alone anymore. And neither are you. That's what matters now. Rachel squeezed his hand tight. Tell me about this CEO, the one from the video. Is she really changing or is it just for show? She's really changing. It's hard for her. Every instinct she has tells her to lead the way her father did. With fear, with control. But she's fighting those instincts. She's choosing to be different. Do you like her? The question caught James off guard. What do you mean? I mean the way she looks at you in some of those news clips. The way she talks about you. It's not just professional respect, Dad. There's something else there. Rachel. I'm not saying you should date her or anything. I'm just saying I noticed. And maybe you did too. James shifted uncomfortably. She's my boss, and she's 14 years younger than me. And up until 3 weeks ago, she was the person making my life miserable. But now she's someone I'm teaching. Someone who's trying to be better. That's all. Rachel smiled, and it was Helen's smile. Okay, Dad, if you say so. They spent the rest of the morning catching up. Rachel told him about her job as a high school teacher, about the students she was helping, about the satisfaction of making a difference in young lives. She sounded like Helen when she talked about teaching, had the same passion for helping people learn. Mom would be proud of you, James said. She'd be proud of you too, what you're doing at Sterling, teaching that whole company how to treat people right. That's exactly what she always said you should do. I know. I wish I'd listened sooner. Around noon, James's phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen. He hesitated, then answered. James, I'm sorry to bother you on your day off, but we have a situation. Can you come to the hangar? What kind of situation? The kind where the Secretary of Defense is here unannounced and wants to see the Phoenix fly. And he specifically asked for you. James looked at Rachel. I have to go. Work emergency. The Secretary of Defense kind of emergency. How did you... Rachel pointed at his phone. You're on speaker, Dad, and I heard everything. Go. This is important. But you drove all this way. I'll still be here when you get back. Go impress the Secretary of Defense. We'll have dinner later. James grabbed his keys. You sure? I'm sure. Dad. He turned. Knock him dead. The hangar was controlled chaos when James arrived. Secret Service agents everywhere. Military officials in dress uniforms. And standing next to the Phoenix Secretary of Defense, William Thornton. A man James had met exactly once 15 years ago at a ceremony in Washington. Victoria saw James and rushed over. Thank God! He's been here for 20 minutes asking questions I can't answer. He wants a demonstration flight. Did he say why he's here? Something about accelerating procurement. He's seen your report. He wants to see you fly. James walked toward the secretary, who turned and extended his hand. Colonel Mitchell, it's been a long time. Mr. Secretary, I didn't expect to see you here. I don't usually do field visits, but your report crossed my desk yesterday morning. Thornton studied James with sharp eyes. General Morrison speaks very highly of you. Says you're the most honest evaluator in the business. Said if you recommend something, it's gold. That's kind of her to say. Thornton gestured at the Phoenix. So this is the helicopter that's all over the news. The one you flew while working as a janitor. Yes, sir. I've read the specifications. I've seen the test data. I've reviewed your report cover to cover. Everything looks outstanding on paper. The secretary paused. But I need to see it myself before I authorize the full procurement package. Can you fly it for me right now? James looked at Victoria, who nodded encouragingly. He walked to the Phoenix and began his pre-flight inspection. The secretary watched every move occasionally, asking questions that showed he actually understood aviation mechanics. Your report mentioned modifications to the control interface, Thornton said. How significant were those changes? Significant enough to improve combat responsiveness. Not significant enough to compromise the original design integrity. The modifications were led by Amy Chen, one of the best interface engineers I've ever worked with. I'd like to meet her after the flight. James climbed into the cockpit and ran through his checks. Everything was perfect. The Phoenix was ready. He took off smoothly, climbing to 500 feet, before executing a series of maneuvers designed to showcase the aircraft's capabilities. Combat turns, quick stops, precision hovers, low-level navigation, everything the military would need in actual operations. From the ground, Victoria stood next to the secretary, her hands clenched so tight her nails dug into her palms. Thornton watched through binoculars, his expression unreadable. "That's exceptional flying." "Colonel Mitchell is the best pilot I've ever seen," Victoria said. "He's also apparently a janitor who fixed a company culture while mopping floors." The secretary lowered his binoculars. "I've been reading about your transformation, Miss Sterling. Quite a story." Victoria felt heat rise to her face. "It's not a story, Mr. Secretary. It's what happened when someone showed me I was wrong about everything. And you listened. That's the remarkable part. Most people in your position would have doubled down. You changed instead." James brought the Phoenix down in a landing so gentle it barely made a sound. He shut down the systems and climbed out. Thornton approached him. "Colonel, that was outstanding. This aircraft is exactly what our special operations teams need." He extended his hand. "I'm authorizing immediate procurement, full order. 96 units with an option for 128 more if the first deployment goes well." Victoria's knees nearly buckled. That was over $3 billion in contracts. "Thank you, Mr. Secretary," she managed. "Don't thank me. Thank your team for building something exceptional. And thank Colonel Mitchell for having the integrity to evaluate it honestly." Thornton turned to James. "I have a question for you, Colonel." "Sir." "Why aren't you still in the Army?" "Medical retirement, sir. Injury that grounded me." "But you're clearly still flying for civilian purposes." "Yes, sir. Military regulations are different." Thornton nodded slowly. "What if those regulations changed? What if we created a special consultant position that let you train our pilots without requiring active duty status? Would you be interested?" James hesitated. "I have commitments here, sir. Miss Sterling hired me." "I'm not asking you to leave Sterling. I'm asking if you'd be willing to consult for us part-time. 20% of your schedule teaching our special operations pilots everything you know. The Army would pay your consulting rate plus expenses." Victoria spoke up before James could answer. "Mr. Secretary, Colonel Mitchell is invaluable to our company. But if the Army needs him, we'll make it work. His knowledge should be shared with the people who need it most." Thornton smiled. "That's generous of you, Miss Sterling. Colonel, think about it. General Morrison will reach out next week with details." After the secretary and his entourage left the hangar, erupted in celebration. Marcus was crying. Amy was being hugged by half the engineering team. Someone started playing music from their phone. Victoria stood apart from the celebration, watching her team with something like wonder on her face. James approached her. "You did it. You saved the company." "We did it. You flew. Amy fixed the interface. Marcus designed the hydraulics. Everyone here contributed something." "But you led them. You created the environment where they could do their best work. That was all you." Victoria turned to face him, and James saw tears on her cheeks. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Win. Succeed. Feel like I deserve it." Her voice cracked. "My whole life I've been chasing my father's approval, trying to prove I was good enough. And now that I've actually accomplished something he never did, building a company people love working for, he's not here to see it." James understood that pain. "My wife never got to see me teach after the military, never saw me use what I learned in combat to help the next generation. She always said that's what I should do. And by the time I started doing it, she was too sick to know. How do you live with that? You honor them by becoming who they wanted you to be. Your father wanted you to succeed even if he didn't believe you could do it his way. Prove him wrong by succeeding your way." 6 months passed. Sterling Aerospace thrived under Victoria's leadership. The Phoenix went into production. The military contracts were fulfilled ahead of schedule. Employee satisfaction surveys showed unprecedented improvements. The company culture transformed from toxic to collaborative. James trained pilots, consulted with the Army, taught the next generation everything he knew. He had dinner with Rachel every other week, visited Helen's grave every Sunday, and told her about the life he was building. Victoria worked alongside her employees, learned every name, understood every story. She turned down 3 acquisition offers because she believed in what they were building. She became the leader her father never could have been. They worked together professionally, maintained boundaries, honored the unspoken agreement they'd made. But everyone in the company could see the way they looked at each other, the way they lingered in conversations, the way Victoria's whole face lit up when James walked into a room, the way James's voice softened when he said her name. On the 1-year anniversary of the viral video, Victoria called a company-wide meeting in the hangar. Every employee was there, from executives to maintenance staff. She stood in front of the Phoenix and addressed them. 1 year ago, I was the worst version of myself. I was cruel, arrogant, blind to everything that mattered. I made a mockery of a good man because I was scared and angry and desperate to prove something that didn't need proving. She looked directly at James. That man could have let me destroy myself, could have taken his revenge, could have walked away and let me fail. Instead, he taught me, challenged me, showed me what leadership actually looks like. Her voice strengthened. This company isn't successful because we build good helicopters. We're successful because we finally understand that people matter more than products. That respect matters more than results. That dignity is earned through how we treat each other, not through what we accomplish. She pulled out a document. I'm announcing today that Sterling Aerospace is implementing the Mitchell Leadership Protocol. Every new hire from janitors to executives will spend 1 week working in maintenance, learning names, hearing stories, understanding that every person here matters. The crowd applauded. Marcus was crying again. Amy was grinning. Jennifer from accounting was holding Sophia, who'd thrived in the company daycare. Victoria continued. We're also establishing the Helen Mitchell Memorial Scholarship, full education funding for children of employees who've faced medical hardships. Because nobody should have to choose between saving someone they love and their family's future. James felt his throat tighten. He hadn't known about this. And finally, Victoria's voice shook slightly. I'm promoting Colonel James Mitchell to Chief Operating Officer. He'll oversee all our operations, all our training programs, all our culture initiatives. Because if we're going to keep being the company we've become, we need the person who taught us how to be that company leading the way. The applause was deafening. James stood overwhelmed as his colleagues cheered. After the meeting, after the congratulations and the handshakes and the tears, James found Victoria in her office. COO, he said, you didn't mention that in your plan. Because I wanted to surprise you, and because you've earned it, and because... She paused. Because it's been 6 months. Actually, it's been 7, and I'm still certain. James stepped closer. So am I. Really? Really. Rachel approves, by the way. She's been asking when I'm going to stop being noble and start being happy. Victoria laughed. Smart daughter. She gets it from her mother. They stood there close enough to touch. Years of grief and growth and transformation between them. So, what happens now? Victoria asked. Now we do what we've been doing. We work. We lead. We make this company everything it should be. He took her hand. But maybe we also have dinner sometimes. Maybe we see where this goes. Maybe we build something together that's about more than helicopters and leadership protocols. I'd like that. Me too. 2 years later, James stood in front of a different crowd at a different ceremony. Rachel was there with her fiancé, General Morrison in full dress uniform, the entire Sterling Aerospace team, and Victoria standing beside him in a simple white dress, holding his hand. The chaplain spoke about second chances, about finding love after loss, about two people who'd built something beautiful from broken pieces. When it was James's turn to speak, he looked at Victoria and said the words he'd written the night before. "I came to Sterling Aerospace looking for a job. I found a purpose. I found a family. I found myself again. And I found you." His voice steadied. "You've made me better, made me whole, made me believe that life after loss is still worth living." Victoria's vows were simpler. "You saw me when I was invisible to myself. You taught me that strength is kindness, that power is service, that the measure of a person is how they treat those who can do nothing for them." She squeezed his hand. "I love you for that. I'll love you for all the years we have left." They were married in the hangar next to the Phoenix, surrounded by the people whose lives they'd changed and who'd changed them in return. That night at the reception, Rachel pulled James aside. "Mom would have loved her. You know that, right?" "I know. I think somehow she sent her to me. Or sent me to her. I don't know how these things work." "Maybe it doesn't matter how it works. Maybe what matters is that you said yes to the possibility, that you let yourself be happy again. Your mother taught me that. She always said happiness is a choice, not a feeling. You choose it every day, even when it's hard." Rachel hugged him tight. "I'm proud of you, Dad. For everything. For surviving. For thriving. For teaching a whole company how to be human again. For letting yourself love someone new while never forgetting someone old." Later, James and Victoria stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the reception continuing inside without them. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't made that stupid marriage proposal?" Victoria asked. "Every day. And every day I'm grateful you did. Because it forced both of us to see what we'd become. And decide to be better. No regrets. About you never. About the 3 years before I met you. Those either. They taught me things I needed to learn. About humility. About resilience. About what really matters when everything else is stripped away." Victoria leaned against him. "I still work in maintenance sometimes. Did you know that? Frank told me. He says you're getting pretty good at it." High praise from Frank. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. James thought about the journey that had brought him here, from colonel to janitor to teacher to leader to husband again, from invisible to seen, from broken to whole, from alone to home. "You know what the best part is?" Victoria said softly. "What's that? We get to do this together. Build the company, teach the people, change the culture, all of it, not as boss and employee, as partners." "Partners," James agreed. "I like the sound of that." Inside, the celebration continued. Outside, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives stood together and chose happiness, chose growth, chose to believe that the best chapters were still being written. And somewhere in whatever place holds the memories of those we've loved and lost. Helen Mitchell smiled. Her husband had finally learned the lesson she'd spent a lifetime teaching him. That dignity doesn't come from what others see when they look at you. It comes from what you see when you look at yourself. That the truest measure of a life well lived is not in the medals earned or the positions held, but in the people you've helped become, who they were meant to be. James Mitchell had spent 3 years being invisible. He'd spent the rest of his life making sure no one else ever had to be, and that made all the difference.